Okay, everybody. So welcome to our plant records webinar on June the 3rd. Together with me, Harvard from Botanical Software, we have Dr. Wahid Arsad and also Greg Payton from the Dose Arboretum. So maybe Greg and Wahid can say hello. So you pop up on the screen for everybody to see.
Hello, everyone. Nice to see you all again. Looking forward to today's topic.
Yes.
Likewise. Also glad to be here and assist how I can. Thank you.
Yeah, wonderful. Sorry, I was so excited about this topic, so I kicked off before you got your foot in there. Sorry. Yes. So today we're going to talk about image management, and we've titled it "Image Management in Botanic Gardens." This is a topic that's sort of becoming more and more complicated as we see with everybody has a smartphone in their pocket. So you're getting pictures captured on a very high rate, and there are many questions around how you deal with this challenge. And we're going to talk about some of these questions today. We're not going to answer all of these questions. It's more of opening up the doors for you to look at resources. As normal, we'll supplement this whole thing with a blog post a bit later on to collate a bit more about, and also more importantly, maybe add some references to some of the things we discussed today. So the idea is to basically paint a picture of what kind of tools you have to work on this particular challenge, and what kind of challenges we have, and then also for you to share with us the things you're struggling with, and then we'll see where we get from there. So to start off, Wahid, we're going to talk a bit about some background aspects around image management in botanic gardens.
Thanks, Harvard, and thanks everyone for joining. Yeah, so as Harvard mentioned, with the advent of mobile phones and other smartphone devices, essentially everyone is a photographer these days. Not that you might think you are, but definitely we're in a digital age of photos. And even with a smartphone, people have a camera within very easy reach within the garden and beyond the garden. And when you consider the other types of devices that are out there for capturing images, such as DSLRs, which you might have, drones, tablets, GoPros, and all sorts of other devices, we're capable of taking a lot of photographs. I think everyone can appreciate that. But from a botanic garden and plant collection management perspective, there are all sorts of interesting questions on what should I be photographing and how do I manage all of my photographic data. So we'll touch on some of those topics today, hopefully. And I thought I'd start by sharing some really interesting statistics that we came across. And in actual fact, there are thought to be over 8.3 trillion photos currently being stored. And as you can imagine, this is growing exponentially year on year. And when we look at the last sort of 3 years from this diagram below, you'll be able to see the proportion of imagery that is being captured on mobile phones, which is the blue percentage. You can see going from 89% to 92 almost, compared to the proportion captured by digital cameras, which is interestingly on the decrease. And so too is the imagery captured from tablets, iPads, and things like that, also on the decrease. So the mobile phone is certainly setting the pace here. And you can imagine when you're in your garden yourself, or you have visitors to your garden, there must be a particular plant in your collection that visitors are always taking a photograph of. And these are the kinds of interesting statistics that's backing that up. And another interesting fact is that an average European is taking 597 selfies a year. It's pretty crazy. I'm clearly doing something wrong there, because I'm definitely not taking that many. So when it comes to photographs as part of your collection, your accessions, they'll have two main components. So the first one, of course, is that living collection, that living material of your plant. And the second component will be the data that's associated with it. And like we've mentioned, that data component is going to likely include a collection of photographs. And these can be a very valuable source of information, primarily for curation, but also beyond that for things like interpretation, display, signage, for publicity, and all sorts of marketing uses. And interestingly, photographs can also provide information in the context of time. So you can imagine photographs from your collection dating back tens, even hundreds of years of particular plants or of particular collections as a whole. They can be very useful. And one of the interesting stories, which I don't know, Pete, I think you're on the call, you might be familiar with, but the story of the Hymenopteris that flowered at Cambridge for the first time in 30 years, back in 2012, I think it was. And that photograph of the flowering plant in the Rubiaceae was very, very nice and very interesting from a publicity perspective, because it ended up drawing a lot of visitors to the garden, and you can see an example of that on the sign there. So when it comes to essential tools of the trade, there are lots of things out there that people use, but what are the main components of taking photographs in your garden? Well, the first is having a camera, and a lot of gardens might have the resources to have a DSLR, so a digital single lens reflex camera. And these tend to be capturing higher quality images than a mobile phone might, but they tend to be slightly on the more expensive side. But what's good with these is that you're able to have interchangeable lenses. For example, a macro lens that you're able to capture individual taxonomic features of your plant, or you might have wide angle shots for larger landscapes, for example. So they're quite versatile when it comes to being able to photograph in your collection. You might also have complicated scanners or modified setups that, for example, if you have a herbarium, that you might have a tripod mounted DSLR that you are able to capture your plant specimens that on a flatbed, for example. And we've touched on mobile phones, of course, and in-field devices. But as Greg mentioned earlier, there are actually other devices out there apart from mobiles, such as digital cameras that are the smaller handheld devices that you might support your photography in your collection. And of course, tripods and light tents, there are all sorts of interesting setups for sort of having a black background or a pure white background. So really trying to get hold of those real taxonomic characters that might be useful for identification and other interesting purposes. And finally, you need to be able to store these photographs. So whether you have storage devices that might be hard drives, or increasingly today, cloud servers that are really mobilizing the use of photography for all sorts of purposes. So when it comes to best practices, for each accession, what should be photographed and how should images be organized in your collection? Well, interestingly, there are gardens out there who have developed protocols for this particular purpose. The UC Botanical Garden in Berkeley has a good example of one that's available online, actually, and worth having a look if your garden doesn't have a protocol. But there are all sorts of interesting characters or habits of the plant, for example, the flowers or the inflorescence and the leaves and the fruits that you might have. So it'd be interesting to hear whether people have a protocol. So let's do the poll. Thanks for reminding me, Havard. So yeah, we're going to do a quick poll. Are you able to run that? Yeah, wonderful. That's me getting carried away. But yes, would be interesting to know whether you have, you feel satisfactorily documenting your imagery is important, and how satisfied you are with that. And how satisfied you are with the tools that are available. So I'll give you a few minutes to do that. 5 more to go. That's wonderful.
We'll stop in 15 seconds. It's hard to guess if somebody's thinking or if they're just not voting. So we got a good representation now.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah,
Okay.
so the results, I think everybody can see that a lot of you are sort of in the middle, neither satisfied nor dissatisfied, and a third of you somewhat dissatisfied by your plant collection and whether it's satisfactorily documented, which is really interesting. And in terms of the tools, it looks like quite a lot of you are, or over half of you are somewhat satisfied with that. And 2/3 of you don't have a standard or protocol. So that's really interesting and very good to have that insight as we continue. So thank you for doing that. So yeah, back to the practices. So yeah, I was mentioning there are several things that you might generally like to capture for each of your accessions. So the first and foremost, that might be your plant label, and that way you can confirm the identification. But also there might be particular features like the flowers, the inflorescence, the leaves, the fruits and the flowers, and the overall habit. And from this example on the right, this Gymnocladus, this woody angiosperm, you can see the type of images that are capturing that particular plant and how might they be used in the context of your curation and management of that. And of course, for some plants, you might need to capture very specific characters, such as for ferns, you might be capturing the sporangia or the seeds and cones of particularly the non-flowering plants, of course, and things like spines on cacti, which can be very good for diagnosing species level identifications. So there's lots of things to consider when it comes to best practices. And Greg, did you have any insights from the Dawes Arboretum?
Well, I mean, as we discussed in prep for this, I voted with the majority in the middle of those things. You know, we like many gardens. I don't have a volunteer crew or a staff crew that can spend time doing photo documentation. So it's a matter of when we just happen to find a plant in flower or in fruit, and just stumble across it and I capture it with the cell phone, or I'm one of those people with the small digital camera that actually has a good macro feature if you want small features. But so there are still many taxa, even with not a single photograph, let alone to the accession. So the tools are adequate. I'm not super impressed with any of the tools. They work. No set policy on how we document things, but I would love to see the ability to use, turn my radio down before it gets loud, the ability to have close-ups of buds and bark and fall color and leaf structure and flower and fruit for every single taxon, to in the future have some sort of way to have like an online key or a class based on photographs, something like that. And as I discussed earlier, it's also a good diagnostic tool if you have multiple photographs of different accessions, and then you can look at them from the taxon viewpoint to see if it's supposed to be a red flowering clone, and then you have one accession that is white flowered. That's a good way to indicate some issue with the ID of that specimen.
Great. Yeah, it's also really interesting that some gardens might have priority plants that must be photographed, or indeed if they can't be photographed because they're not mature enough, for example, if you're looking for a cone or fruit or of a particular plant. So there's lots of considerations. So on that note, I'm going to pass over to Havard, who's going to talk about digital asset management.
Yeah, thank you, Wahid. Yes, so we thought it was poignant as we're talking about images. Primarily, the discussion here is about images. Obviously, when we use the word digital asset, it can comprise also other types of digital media like videos and audio. So within our context, it's images we're talking about mostly. And I thought it was worthwhile mentioning a sort of a specialized tool that is used by other industries. Typically, especially if you have institutions that are very focused on marketing or on a lot of media sort of outreach, then having the right keeping control of your assets, but also knowing what you have is very important. Now, in our story, I think also that the growth of assets, the growth of images we get, the more pressure or the challenge becomes more and more complicated. And for some institutions, then looking at these kind of products is very relevant. And I know at least Courtney from Smithsonian, obviously, I think you got about 18 million pictures or something. So you're a high consumer of this kind of products. We're going to talk a bit about your story a bit after this slide here. But for others, there are a vast range of products out there. And some are very fast, very advanced and very sophisticated and very expensive. And then there are other products are on the other spectrum. There are some free products, etc. So we're not going to go into that. I just want to give you an idea about what they do. You think of it as a way of organizing your documents, but then in this case, images, and keeping them organized in a more structured manner. But excuse me, one thing that is particularly useful for these kind of products is what is called meta tagging, that you can attribute information to the actual files. This is handy if these files are moved around, because then if a picture on itself is sort of, some of you may not know this, but that when you open a file, there's actually information about who actually took the picture, what kind of camera, and then you can attribute more things like copyright and other things. That's very useful. The other thing that these kind of products can do is to also transform the images to different formats and different sizes very easily, and also keep track of duplicates and a lot of advanced stuff. I'm not going to go into too much about this, but just wanted to give you an idea that this product is out there. There are products out there that might fit your needs when you start to realize that you're having a problem. That's really where you need to start to look at this. And for some institutions who have a very active sort of outreach from a sort of marketing perspective, you might actually already have such a product in your institution without actually realizing it, or you might know that. And there might be a way to piggyback and use your plant records images together with on the same platform. So there are many kind of opportunities around that. I'll leave it at this. We'll see if with our blog article, if you could put a bit more spin on this in terms of links to articles about different alternatives, etc. The next thing I wanted to talk about was rights management. So first, a big disclaimer. None of us are lawyers, so the advice you're getting now is, ask a lawyer if we're right or not. So no, anyway. So the point here is to remind yourself of a couple of things, and that is, first of all, the pictures you have. Are they yours or not? That's something to sort of be sure of. And obviously, if you take a picture, so there are a couple of things I want to point out. In most countries, the copyright laws are quite straightforward for employees, for example. Staff members, any work you do as a staff will be attributed to the actual employer. So that's quite straightforward. But there is some simple case of volunteers, for example. If you have volunteers coming on for the summer, you don't have any contract. Oh yeah, it's my uncle's friend or something, and he starts or she starts taking a lot of pictures. Who owns those pictures? That's actually, from a copyright perspective, a very probably quite a clear-cut case. It's actually the volunteer's property, unless you haven't explicitly written a contract or something. So these things are quite important to be aware of, so that you don't sort of create that kind of accumulated problem that might pop up later on. So that's why I put down on the bottom here some awareness around that with your staff. And the other thing to also be, there's a lot of free or material out there that are open and accessible that you could use in your collection. And that's also being familiar with how these rules work. and I'll talk about that in the next slide. The other thing is, on the other spectrum is, how do you protect your own rights? And that's basically to be very clear about your position in terms of terms and conditions. I'm going to show a bit of how they do it at Smithsonian as an example. There's also a lot of tips and how to sort of protect your thing. I just mentioned watermark as a I've read a few articles about how that's really considered a waste of time by many. So I just wanted to flag that, because there are tools out there to wipe them away anyway. And of course, it distorts the picture. So be a bit concerned, or be a bit clear about how you pick your tools here. But as many of you are in the world of education, you want to share your images as much as you can anyway. So how relevant this is for our group is uncertain, but I think in the blog article, we'll put a few links to articles related to this as well, because it's a big topic. But for this, I wanted just to bring some awareness to these two questions, so that you know at least that this is something to look into. Now, if you are in a position of wanting to share your images and want to be explicit about it, I think that's a very good idea and a very good principle. There are many ways to do that, but a very common approach is to use what is called the Creative Commons license model. So this is a license that basically tells the consumer that they can use this product for free. That's the baseline for a Creative Commons license. Here you are, this image, you can use it for free, but there might be some restrictions to how you can use this image. That's just as an example, the Wikipedia, all the content on Wikipedia is under a Creative Commons license with attribution. I'm 95% sure about that, but at least look that up yourself. But the point here is that you can share that product. So the way that, just also want to make, there are many other types of license models out there, but this is a very well established license model that is used quite a lot in academia. And it has sort of, and the good thing then is that it's transparent and easy to understand. Typically, when you see this CC, and then there will be a link to the actual license terms. And just to quickly go through these different attributions, so you can decide, we just going to give it for free. There's no restrictions. People can use its images in any way you like. Or you could say you can use it, but you have to tell that you got it from us. And the third thing here is you could use it, you could tell it from us, or you can, if you're going to use this or do it in anything, you have to also share it at least with the same generous license. You can't take it and then restrict it so that nobody else can use it. So that's the kind of model here. And the last ones on the bottom here are no derivatives. That means that you can use it, but you can't adapt it to your own needs and change it around and make it yours. And the last one is non-commercial use. So you'll see several models of this floating around in the world. But you see, further down on the right here, you see that the license becomes more and more restrictive. But the baseline for a Creative Commons license is that it's free. You don't have to pay for it. So that's like, and for that, I was just going to show an example from Smithsonian. Let me see if I can find that here. Yes, so anybody who's had the pleasure of looking at the Smithsonian collection site, they also have, of course, one of the largest collections of artifacts in the world, and they include their plants in that context. So that's really cool. And when you look at, I'm just clicked around here and opened up this specific epidendrum. And you see here that they attribute the copyright here. So it's a CC0. That means that you can take it and do what you like with it. So that's very generous. But what I think is very elegant with their approach is that I'm sure they have really super high-res images somewhere, but that's not what you're getting. You're getting a really nice picture. I can probably zoom in a bit, but it's not super 100 megapixel, etc. So it's a nice trade-off as an example of how we can approach this. And you can click in here, and if you want to get a sort of a primary and how to approach licensing, this is quite a quite a nice way of obviously they link to the Creative Commons license itself, but they give in a bit of an example of how this is used. I don't know if you want to add anything, Courtney, to what we've talked about so far.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. One of the things I wanted to say is that's the great thing about having a data asset management system, is that when we do have the funds to hire professional photographers, they provide us with a raw file that's like our archive. So for marketing or anything else, we might want to have that high resolution photo. We have that in our DAM system, along with a usable like TIFF is how we store the versions that are getting pushed out to sites like these and the Plant Explorer. Yeah, I think that's great having the storage. We don't have to worry about storing that on our own computers or anything. And the other great thing, I mean, this probably comes with being at such a large institution, but the data asset management system has its own like team of people that help us, you know, if anything's going wrong with those assets and anything. So that's nice. Trying to think of some other things that you mentioned that we do utilize. We definitely add metadata to our images. That's how we link them to all of our different collection systems. And that's what I spent a lot of time doing that. The accession numbers, and then also just information, keyword information. Sorry, give me 1 sec.
That's okay. Yeah, one thing to mention too. So Courtney mentioned the raw file format. I don't know if some of you may be familiar with that, or maybe everybody. But so professional cameras can capture in what is called raw, which is yeah. What I mean, it's a format that you can use to produce different types of formats. I'm not sure how to summarize that in a kind of cohesive manner, but it's a very good format because you can retain a lot of data about the picture, and you can manipulate the actual photograph based on the raw data. So I think we should have a link to that in an article as well. Why,
Yeah,
Greg?
I often compare it to like like no compression, like a digital master that is like the most large format with a no compression and no data loss. So
yeah.
Another thing about the RAWs, for example, for our mass digitization for orchids, like you see here, we also had a color bar so that we could determine that the color was correct, and those are in our raw files. But in our TIFFs, we've cropped the photos so that, you know, they're not displayed. So yeah, definitely for internal use. And we utilize two different things because we're definitely limited by funds, like everybody else. So we were lucky enough to get funds for a DSLR like volunteer camera that is used sometimes. And then we've had funds to hire these professional photographers. But we also have our horticulturists in the field on their iPhones taking photos that we store as catalog photos. So we're storing those in Iris BG, but not in DAMs, just because of the storage requirements.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, Courtney. So yeah, so as you can hear then from Courtney and Smithsonian, that DAMS, it's a tremendously interesting acronym, not necessarily sort of perfect for that DAMS, but anyway, it's a great tool if you need it, and yeah, so have a look into that, and I look forward to hearing discussions and comments around that later on through the year. So okay, so let's go back to the slides. I think here we go. So yeah, so we're now going to go have a breakout session where we're going to discuss two questions. The question number one is: are there things you are unable to do or could be made easier in your current workflow? So when it comes to images and how you manage images, are there things that you're unable to do today that you wish you could do in terms of taking pictures and managing them? Or are there things that you feel desperately could be made easier? And the second question is, do you feel you can use your images to their fullest potential in relation to your garden's mission? So thinking about how you engage with visitors, how you, in the context of education, etc. How do you use your images today? And do you feel you can use them to their fullest potential? So what we're going to do is we're going to break out to, let's see, 4 rooms, I think, yeah, with 5 participants in each room, roughly. And then if you can, if you make sure that one of you take notes and bring those comments back into the main session afterwards, and then we'll collate them together as we walk through each room and what you thought about it. So we'll send those questions onto the general chat, I think, so that you have that, so you don't. And then we'll start the breakout rooms in a second here, and we'll let this breakout session last for 10 minutes. So we will break out then in 30 seconds here. I'm just going to make sure that we don't have anything. Yeah, there's nobody stranded, so that's good. Yeah, okay, so we'll see you again in roughly 10 minutes. And then, thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much for your participation in the rooms. I don't know, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share a Miro board here, sort of a whiteboard, so we can see and make notes about the topics or the thoughts that or conclusions that we had from the breakout rooms. And I think we just do it in the order that's listed on my so just a reminder about the questions here, just for those who, I'll bring it up in full page here so it's a bit easier for you to see. I didn't want to do that. Apologies for hiccups here. We do it like this. So, are there things you are unable to do or could be made easier in your current workflow? This is obviously in relation to image management. And the second question was, do you feel you can use your images to the fullest potential in relation to your garden's mission? And if we go to the first room, which was with Dawn and John Green and Sarah McNall from so that's John from Swedish University of Agricultural Science, Dawn from the National Botanic Garden in Wales, and Sarah McNall from Cornell Botanic Garden. Who is your speaker?
We didn't choose any speaker, actually. I'm sorry.
That's fine.
Automation is one thing. Anyways, it would be interesting to shorten the workflow if possible, because it's quite tedious to go out, take images, and then download them to your computer, sort them, maybe add to like Iris, choose which are going to be published to the internet, and yeah, if we go to marketing or in our like more general parts of the organization, there's things lacking a little. So I mean, in the dream world, the software in the mobile or camera would know where I am, close to which accessions, and it could perhaps even identify some of the plants and suggest an accession number. But that's yeah, thinking big here.
That's brilliant. This is like when what you said there is a sort of perfect combination with everything you said aligns with what technology is available today. So it's theoretically possible to wire up such a product.
Exactly.
So that's
exactly
cool.
theoretically, yeah. But but the shorter the workflow, the better, and the more uses that you can get from different parts in the workflow, the better, because it is a long one, and yeah, it's a lot of work taking images. So.
Yeah. Okay, that's very interesting. And did you have anything for the other question? Do you feel you can use your images to your fullest potential?
I think we all agreed that we could have better cooperation with other parts of our organization, because we take pictures that are not used outside, say, plant records, but there's also images taken outside the plant records management that is not used within the plant records or anything else. So if we as an organization could work together better with digital assets, it would be helpful.
Yeah, that's very interesting, because I suppose from a collection management perspective, it becomes very accession or species focused, and sometimes there are imagery that you might have a wonderful picture that represents a bed that for some reason has, so that's not one accession. I don't know, there's all these kind of combinations and overlaps. Yeah, that's very interesting. And I suppose that's where you get these so if you have a digital asset management system, you might be able to help that facilitate that type of collaboration. Or that's very interesting. Cool. Any other things that we want to share, or should we move over to
well, last thing, I tried doing some 360 photos of our garden. We had the idea that you could place yourself like in a Google Street View module and actually change the month of the year, because we work with landscape architect students and engineers, and if they could sit by the desk and they could pose a question like, how does Juno Claudius dioicus look in May compared to June? And yeah, it's actually easy to automate, and if you have good 360 with high resolution, you could probably look around for the plants yourself, so you don't have to take an image of every single plant. So, but we got stuck somewhere. We did a 360 photo shoot. You can look at it on Google Maps, but the next module was never put into place. So.
Yeah, I suppose in a similar vein, you have these, I was going to say stop animation, but what do you call them when you do this kind of what's it called?
Time lapse.
Time lapse, yeah, that's it. Technically you're left with a video, but it's a very instructive video. It can tell a beautiful story of flowering or whatever. Yeah, cool. Time lapse. Maybe we should add that to Wahid as well. That's probably, that's a similar thing, but I suppose it's hard for many to capture or to organize that kind of material if you don't have any kind of advanced tools. Great, thank you so much. So let's move over to room 2, which is Maureen McCadden, Peter Brownless, and Pete and Shari. Hello. Pete, you're on mute, I think.
Yeah, we also didn't kind of appoint anyone to speak. And to be honest, we also didn't even get around to discussing the questions, because we spent the main part of it introducing ourselves and discussing our own issues with images. What came out of it for us was how complex handling digital images are compared to the good old days of a slide or a print, and how many organizations have so many different storage systems out there. Because a lot, Edinburgh, for instance, apparently have got images going right way back to the kind of the start of photography, and you've got multiple different places things are stored, and how do you bring all those together into one place and make it as simple as possible? I mean, the kind of practical thing from my point of view, which might kind of fit in, is we when we try and store our kind of master image, we try and rename, because the worst thing is having a bunch of images with just a digital number, and actually making sure you have the name of the plant or the accession with the image. We spend a lot of time renaming all our plants with the accession number, whether there's a technical way at some point in the future when we take a photo of the label as well as the plant, the photo of the label can actually be incorporating, updating the names. Don't know if anybody else in our group wants to say anything.
we talked a bit about how we managed getting the images from taking them ourselves to the particular difficulties of having volunteers who actually can be very enthusiastic but not horticulturally trained. So you get pictures not necessarily of what you think you're getting, or at least what they end up being named. So that is a fairly big issue, that there does need to be editorial control or correcting to make sure that the images are actually what they say they are.
Yeah, that's very good. There was one really good tip I got from, I think it was Enlightenment, I've been repeated before as well, that if you instruct somebody to take pictures, take first a picture of the label and then take pictures of the plant and then finish off taking the picture of the label again. So you sort of like bracket all the pictures with the label first and afterwards. Yeah.
Then there's no guarantee that they even take the picture of the plant that relates to the label.
That's, of course, that is a challenge. That's when we want to have high precision GPS in our camera, so we know exactly where you were. Or maybe the photographer keeping track of him. I don't know, or her. But yeah, no, this storage challenge is very, very kind of that a lot of people struggle with. So that's an interesting thing also with when going back to this idea of actually tagging the files with metadata. So when you have advanced search products, they can search on the metadata in the files. So it's just a complicated story of coming up with a good file name and that is useful. But if you have the metadata, you can have as much rich information as you like. So you can have a full plant record in there if you want to, even though that might not be a way to go. But yeah, that's very interesting. Volunteers, yeah, that's a big. It's probably a whole session on that. I think maybe image handling with volunteers. So yeah, any more to share from that group?
I just wanted to bring up a couple of just very basic points. We talked about the after process being very time consuming, which we kind of restated, and that Longwood mentioned that automation is key, and compression and storage are sometimes an issue. Yeah. And we have a lot of project videos that I would like to be able to somehow incorporate better in connection with our plant collections.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Okay, great. So let's. I see that we just conscious of time. We also need to. We were running a bit over here, but I really would love to hear from room 3 and 4 as well. So that's Martin and Mats and Wahid in room 3.
Yeah, I can summarize briefly. In the interest of time, I'll just keep it short. But Martin mentioned some good points on making batch changes to photographs before they're uploaded, and that would save time and energy, and sort of making comments that might be applicable to all of those images before they get uploaded. And also he mentioned an interesting topic on social media photographs that are increasingly being used, and the photographs that are taken in the collection, the same photo can be used in social media too. So there's obviously some overlap between the two.
Yeah, that's an interesting aspect of when you look at in your plant record system, you look at accession and you see the social media feed on that species from your garden. So you can see what kind of interaction you've had. That might be interesting. So you might see, yeah, anyway, that's cool. Yeah, sorry.
No, I just wanted to say, I mean, yeah, even just at the moment, it's not even possible to upload multiple images as well, which comes in with the batch changes. And then just one thing I was thinking of now is images where you can tag. So what happens now, if you look at a historic image, you have to, if there's multiple accessions appearing in one picture, you have to upload that same image to every single accession. It'd be nice to do some sort of form of tagging accessions, tagging species, tagging plants. It especially happens when you do publications and people want to know what plants do you see in this particular photograph and so on. So when you deal with the landscape, not a picture of individual plants.
Yeah. Yeah, you're in some ways you might have pictures that represent 5 plants, and they should then be sort of reference to all those 5 in a way, I suppose. Is that what you meant?
Yeah, and that could be current pictures, but it can also be historic pictures where you see a tree back in the day and stuff, but you see 2 or 3 different trees, 2 or 3 different accessions in the same picture. And it'd be interesting now you have to do multiple uploads to positively link them with each other, but it'd be good to sort of be able to upload one image and tag it with multiple accessions.
Yeah, it goes back to John's example of 3D as well. Then
Yeah,
you
exactly.
have 749 accessions being tagged in one go, kind of thing. Yeah, and that's really interesting. Cool. Okay, so let's move over to the last group here, which was Anne, Courtney, Greg. Reinout was not part of that group, but he was there, listed there now, and Vibeke. So I don't know who's your spokesperson. Greg is on mute.
Anne had asked me if I would talk, and I certainly don't mind. But yeah, we spent some time getting to know each other, but had some issues and answers to the questions here. What are we unable to do, and workflow issues. And Vibeke was talking about how the even with IRIS-BG, I assume the image structure is still somewhat flat. You can't really search too much like within the image system. So if there was better ways to utilize that. Courtney from Smithsonian, who I wish we had their system. They're doing a lot more than we are in the way of capturing images, but they still have the same issues that we have, in the sense of we have multiple gardeners. Our PR marketing folks will take photos of plants, but not share them with us, not take pictures of the label. Then they end up sending the photo to me and say, what plant is this? I just posted it on Facebook. Somebody's asking what the plant is. So there's a big disconnect. So the workflow about how images should be captured and how they are documented could be improved a lot. I would like to utilize images more in educational programming. So photos of buds, scars, leaves, flowers, bark, all those things put together for diagnostic use, for having educational programs for keying out the plants by photos, that sort of thing would be nice. Read through and Anne from Barbados here was quite nice to send me some extra notes, yeah, so she's working more to create a structure. They're trying to document the natural attacks of the island of Barbados, and looking to create a process for that. So I think that was the gist of our notes in the effort of a time here, unless Anne or someone else has some additional comments.
Nope.
I think you said it all, Greg. I think we also second most of what the other groups had said.
Correct. Yeah.
Thank you.
That's brilliant. One thing I was also thinking about, now that some of you have legacy or pictures going back 10, 20 years, and the cameras are getting better and better and better. So you might have you think you have a huge number of pictures, but some of them might not actually be up to scratch anymore. It's again, as you said, Pete, as well, with images are complex, so it's quite hard to sort of figure out if you have poor quality images about taxon or not. But I don't know if there's some machine learning or some technique here to get an automatic kind of ranking of the quality you have. But that would be really cool in the future, to kind of be able to tell what you're missing for a certain species. So it's hard to summarize this, but my takeaway for this is like automation. It's a very laborious endeavor to capture your collection. Even if you have 100 volunteers, you need to actually get the pictures organized and get them in the right place. That's etc. etc. And there are some interesting technologies that are out there already that could help a lot of these things, or help this or move this forward. Yeah, these things like these 360 photos and all that kind of thing. And so yeah, this is very useful. It's funny how this whole thing about accession focused record keeping takes away that aspect of you actually have a garden with the landscape and with plants that are growing together. And sometimes like if you have epiphydiums or plants that basically rely on each other, they're both represented at the same time in a photo. So that's also a very interesting comment. I don't know if anybody else has anything else to share before we close off for today.
Well, just a second, the thought about having the image with multiple tags, to list all the species that are in one image. For example, I took a photo of a beautiful red maple. A red Japanese maple cultivar this spring, and there was this flowering a rhododendron behind it in flower, and everyone is like, "Well, what's that plant in the back?" And it's like, "Well, I have to go look to see where it was, and then try to figure it out. It makes it difficult."
Yeah. So our dream scenario is to do that scary thing that Facebook does, who will recognize all your friends on the picture and automatically tag it for you. Oh, that's this species. That's that species. Yeah, that's where we're heading, hopefully.
Harvard. I mean, the other thing which I'm kind of also aware of, we talk about this digital assets and the and all the digital photos, but a lot of us are old institutions, and we have a lot of analog photos, and we need to keep track of those as well. So those, if you've got a slide or a print of an image of a plant, we also need to be able to link that to the accession. It's very easy to forget we've got that stuff. Yeah, that's very good. And of course, if they're with analog cameras, the actual quality could be quite high, especially with slides. So that could be of historic value, of course, but also could be actually photographically quite good sometimes. So yeah, that's interesting. Good point. Very good point. Okay, thank you very much. I don't know, we have a workshop on Monday at the American Public Garden Association. So if you haven't signed up, you are out of luck because it's fully signed up already. But we are not 100% sure if there will be a recording of that, but there is a recording of this at least. So we'll put that out on our YouTube channel, and then we will also follow up with a blog at some point in June, if time permitting. And then I hope to see you next time on our next webinar, which I'm not sure about when it is yet, but we'll try to we'll send out some information about that. So thank you so much for joining. It was great to see you all, and hope you have a wonderful June. And yeah, keep in touch.